Yeah, why'd you call it retro podcast?
Well, so the retro theme, the reason why it's called retro podcast is because we do a lot of retro illustrations. And so we thought it'd be nice to call it like a retro theme mainly because of the illustrations, but sometimes we also discuss one of the newest questions that we've been going over with guests is our last questions. We usually ask them what was your favorite retro product growing up, growing up in the early years. But anyhow, that is
Yeah.
for last, and let's get to the main part. You've been working on a musical called Finding Helena. Helena,
Yeah.
what's the story about?
Um, anyway, the first, let me say, live and on podcast air, congratulations to you and your hard work, especially graduating college and getting that script done and entered in contest where it won. I mean, just congratulations to you. I'm very proud of you.
Thank you.
And I know we've been talking for a while, and you've been telling me your plans. All your plans have been just rock solid plans, and that's what it takes to be successful. Even in writing creative, it's a business and it's a craft. And anyway, congratulations to you for doing the hard work of your crafts or your crafts,
Oh
because
yes.
you're a multimedia talented guy. Um, but back to your question, Finding Helena. So, by the way, findinghelenamusical.com, no periods or spaces in between. Um, it's the story of, it's set in Warsaw, 1940. It's the story of Helena. She's the daughter of a Nazi officer who her father is put in charge of the Warsaw ghetto. And she meets and falls in love with a Jewish resistance fighter, and she ends up realizing what the Nazis are doing. She's in her late teens, and she runs away with the Jewish resistance fighter to get away from basically her Nazi family. And this is their story told as a musical. It's been about 10 years. I It was conceived by my stepdaughter, Alexandra Conroy, and she started writing it, and she's been writing it by herself for almost 10 years. And I was guiding her along the way. And then it got picked up by producers who optioned it. And then COVID happened and that fell apart. And, I've been writing scripts and songs my whole life. And at some point, the whole, well, everybody floundered in COVID, in 2020, I should say. And I said, if you would like me to join you as co-writer, I'd be happy to do that, and we can write the songs. And so I did that. We started a year and a half ago, and it took about a year to get the script rewritten and into shape and all the songs written. And we did, and we have a big reading coming up at the end of this week, July 30th, and then October 20th. So we have also the big readings in New York for Broadway producers and directors and people, investors, October 25th of this year at the Pearl Studios. And so big things happen.
And what was the inspiration behind this idea? Because I really love the idea that you explained. It almost puts me in the mind of Mary and Joseph a little bit, just like the Mary and Joseph, how they're trying to get away from
Yeah.
her. That's what
And,
started to remind me of a little bit. And what was the inspiration behind the story?
well, I have to give Alexandra, my daughter, credit for that because it's completely her concept. And she graduated with a degree in theater and a focus on acting, and but she's also a writer, and she thinks, she's always thinking. Well, she loves World War II. And she's always loved studying World War II, and she also loves theater, and she also is she loves the Jane Austen period love stories where they're um, the, the love stories where it's not easy to be in love, and it's a bit of the Romeo and Juliet syndrome, except we're not talking the tragic love stories. We're talking the incredibly difficult love stories where people come together from two different tribes or with huge cultural or physical barriers. Um, you know, I don't know, kind of like Kimberly Akimbo. It's a love story where, there's huge obstacles. Anyway, she loves those kind of things and is an incredible idea person. And she's come up with, even the plays and the stories she wrote in college as class assignments were beautiful concepts. And that's what she does, is come up with these incredible concepts. And this was one. And I loved it from day one, 10, 11 years ago when she came up with it. So when she's like, how do I develop this? I'm like, start outlining all that. Anyway, when she brought this concept up, I was like, oh my goodness, this is an incredible concept. Just, it's so simple, but so deeply layered in complications, which, those complications are conflict that makes for drama, that makes for good theater. And when she created it, I don't think she realized how rich and layered and wonderful this concept was. And I think she realizes it now as it's been fully fleshed out and is this incredible musical that is taken on a life of its own. So yeah, it was her love of theater and love stories and her, her side interest in World War II. She loves studying World War II, and she's met so many World War II veterans and talked to them. And she's read so much, it's like she reads about World War II and Germany and Poland and Austria and France and England and what happened there. She reads that stuff for fun, as do I. So that was a nice coincidence.
My brother is a big World War II guy. He likes to do a lot of research on World War II. He's into more of planes, like World War II planes.
Yeah, me
Yeah.
too, because I'm a pilot. So
Yeah. And speaking of pilot, have you been flying anywhere recently?
yes, yesterday we flew down to the coast to see my parents and spend the day with them because my sister was visiting, and it's a pretty long drive, but if you take an airplane, it's much faster.
Nice.
So yeah, had a beautiful flight. And it's really hot here. We live in San Antonio, but you get up to 6,000 feet and the air is much cooler. So that's nice.
Yes, it is. And my family and I went to Vancouver at the beginning of the summer, and it was a lot cooler down there than we expected. There were some days we had some hot days, but it was nice and cool.
Oh yeah, on the coast there, it's chilly. Yeah, love that.
For people who want to get a pilot's license or want to fly, what if it's for fun or for a job or like a career, and same with writing, what is the best advice that you would pass on to those beginners?
That's very interesting, that you would equate writing and developing that and starting that with flying airplanes, both of which I've done. It's the same process when you're starting anything. And I tell a lot of people this: you don't have to wait till you're enrolled in a class. You can start now. Especially, you kids today with your internet, you have all knowledge ever at your fingertips. And you can immediately get access to way too many articles on how to get started. But that is my advice: is start doing it, start reading about it, and start doing it. It's whether it's learning to fly an airplane, you can go start watching videos. You can go to the FAA website and download the training materials for free. There's two key books you start with. They're very thick books, very technical books, but they're free on the FAA website because the FAA, which is the U.S. government, created these books because they are the authority that certifies pilots. Anyway, just as you can go and you can start reading about building stories. And do you want to build a story? Do you want to write short stories? Or do you want to write novels? Or do you want to write musicals? Or do you want to write screenplays? Plenty of people can offer their advice. What I would steer people to is look for a process. Don't look for advice look for a process, you know, and go, you know, Aaron Sorkin, he has a master class online, and I loved that. Screenwriting U is something with Hal Krosman, screenwritingu.com. They are incredible. They really, I've been writing scripts for decades, and he taught me, Hal Krosman at Screenwriting U. He, you know, it's kind of like I played piano for decades, and I found a incredible master who I never really took piano lessons, but I took like 6 months of lessons from this master when I was older, and I could play piano well, but I didn't really understand what I was doing, so I wasn't really progressing. And the same thing happened in screenwriting. And I went and I found about Screenwriting U, and I thought, oh, one of these online things, let me try it. But they were incredible, and it was more work than any college class I've ever taken, let me tell you, because this is serious. You know, they're serious about elevating your writing abilities, especially in screenwriting. And but it's
Yeah, I think you froze on my end.
I didn't really understand.
Yeah,
Oh,
you froze on my end.
can you hear me now?
I can hear you.
Anyway, so like I equate I met this this piano master who gave me lessons, and even though I played piano for decades, he really taught me what I was doing, and so I could understand what I was doing better, so I could get better at it. He broke down, you know, the components of rhythm and integration of melody, and you know, and you know, I've been playing piano for 30 years, so everybody considered me a really good piano player. But until I worked with him, well, after working with him for just 6 months on these core exercises, my piano playing and my composing just elevated to places where I never would have expected. Same thing with my screenwriting, and you can do this in novel writing. You find people that are doing it really well and know what they're doing and study the process, and then you go study what they're doing. And when they tell you to do something, you do it. You don't go, oh, I know better than that. You know, that doesn't make sense to me, so I'm not going to do it. You know, you got to wipe your brain of your bias and do, when people offer their process, and I'm not saying any advice, I'm saying their process, they offer you a process, go do it and look, you know, explore those characters, and then you go build your own characters. One of the best things, it's like in songwriting, if you want to learn to write songs, go take an existing hit song and rewrite it, you know, put new lyrics to it. And maybe it's about something else, but practice that, because you've got a great template there, and you can change all the lyrics. And then guess what? Go change the melody and change the chords and rewrite it to the point where it's a whole new song. And suddenly you now, which is a great way to learn to write songs, is take apart what other people have done and really study it. Yeah, that was a long answer, but there's the short answer is go find people who have a solid process and study their process and study their results. You know, read the scripts that are good and watch the movies. When watch movies, outline, you know, find a movie you love, outline the plot and outline the plot of what the characters are doing, but also do what I call the emotional outline, which is what is the emotional drivers for what they're doing, you know, because that's more important, because that's really what the story is about, is how the emotion of these people is driving them to do whatever it is they're doing that's interesting and worth writing as a movie.
Very well done. And That's what I do, because like if I'm studying movies, one of the movies that I've studied the most is Star Wars A New Hope and Frozen. Not the sequel to Frozen, but the first Frozen.
Okay, yeah, that's a great, that's a well done movie, Frozen.
It
Yeah,
is a
and
well done movie.
yeah.
And the
In
animation
fact,
is brilliant.
yeah, when I saw Frozen, I literally, it stood out to me more than any other animated movie because, and I saw it with my kids, and um, I, I, I said every single category of craft in movie making is done at the highest level in Frozen. The plot is incredible. And obviously, many people put a lot of work into the plot. The songs, the writing, the composing of the music is incredible. Everything is an 11 on a scale of 1 to 10. And the orchestration, the singing, the voices, I was overwhelmed because, I watch movies. I have for a long time. I've watched them from the point of like a architect and a construction engineer look at a building. That's how I watch movies. And it sometimes annoys my wife very much. Um, and my kids, but they're growing and they're gone, so we don't watch movies together that much. But yeah, I look at it as as the construction engineer and the architect and Frozen. And so it's funny you bring up Frozen because it's like that really stands out is an amazing amount. I mean, just everything in it. The direction. You look at the direction and you think about that in animation because in animation, it's a it's a rendering and it is 1,000% under the control of the director and the artist, you know. And unlike when we shoot a movie, there's environmental things and things. It's not 100%, 1,000% under your control, but animation is. And my goodness, it's like some of the Pixar brings that level of quality and detail, but Frozen was like, holy cow. Yeah, there you go.
Like this one, the Super Mario Bros. Movie. I mean, it had that animation was beautiful when I went and saw that in the theater twice. And it's funny when you're saying that. Frozen's a great Disney movie. Don't forget Encanto is another great Disney movie. And
Yeah.
it's funny because John Leguizamo was one of our people that was supposed to get interviewed, but sadly he had to get put on hold because the SAG strike has been going on for quite some time. And speaking of SAG strike or writer strike, like what's your reaction to the whole strike that's been going on?
Um, it's interesting. So I'm not a working writer. I mean, I'm a member of the WGA in arrears, as they call it, which means I haven't worked in a while, so I haven't paid dues in a while, and so they don't. Nobody knows about me or cares about me from the union side. But it's interesting because basically technological advances. That's my big concern, and that's where I think the strike is really important, or I should say the union is really important because the studios and producers, it's all about money for them. And like any business, their goal is to optimize their dollar. And what happens is on the writer side, we're like, oh, I just want to create stuff and sell it. Oh, I'm happy now. Meanwhile, it can have so many, let's see, iterations now. Everything you do can be exploited in so many different ways for profit that even just a few years ago, you could not imagine it. And that potential of everything we do and we write, or our imaging and our acting, it's intellectual property that can be exploited in unimaginable ways at this point. And so we need to cover what we cannot conceive yet. And that needs to be brought into contracts so that it's like, hey, if you I don't know. If you take my script and you end up, there ends up being a derivative of something I created, even though I couldn't have imagined that that little chunk of it was a derivative that generated some sort of media or entertainment product. It's still my intellectual property, and I need to be protected and compensated for the creative work I did. Especially people, I mean, actors and writers, it's not even a vocation. You can't make a living as an actor or a writer. Or you can't consider it a career because it is so difficult to make a living. If you've made a living as an actor or a writer, it's an anomaly. It's not the norm, it's the exception. And so we're at such a disadvantage, any creatives, it's such a disadvantage that intellectual property, which is exactly what it is, it's IP, it's property that's intellectual, it's a creative product, it needs to be protected. And yeah, it's hard to, it's so nebulous. So it's like, well, these things don't exist and we can't conceive of them. How do we protect something that we can't see, touch, feel, or even imagine? That's a difficult chore. And I want to see that dealt with. And I think that's part of the strike. And it's going to be interesting to see what comes of it.
Definitely. Me and Adam Sandler's nephew, Jared, we were having a discussion about that yesterday morning because we were trying to get him scheduled for an interview, but he had to get put on hold as well because of strike. We were also having a discussion saying how it kind of sucks that everything has had to be put on hold because of strike, but I mean, it is what it is. There's nothing you can do about it. And now, last question is, you watch a lot of movies. What was your favorite movie growing up in the 70s or 80s?
In the 70s,
it could be more than one.
In the 70s or 80s, I have to say the one that just hangs with me is the original Michael Crichton movie. My favorite movie from, because I just turned 64.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. It was a very happy birthday. My favorite movie from like the 70s, and in fact, Andromeda Strain, it's Andromeda Strain by Michael Crichton. And my dad's a scientist, and he loves science fiction movies. So he would take us to science fiction movies as kids. And he took us to see this. I think he took us to see this in the theater. Well, of course, it was the 70s. It's the only place you could see movies. Anyway, we saw it. And it was just, I was so struck by it. And then when I was a little older, I read the book Andromeda Strain. And of course, Michael Crichton wrote Westworld, which was a huge and incredible movie starring Yul Brynner. And I think that was the 70s. And of course, it has been revised. I think HBO or somebody revived Westworld as a series, which is where, robots are entertainment, and it gets out of hand. But yeah, I have to say the most impact is Michael Crichton. And of course, but I'm also, the other big movie of my childhood was Mary Poppins, the original Mary Poppins.
My dad loves that movie.
I love that movie, and I was 6 years old when I saw it. And my dad's a marine biologist, researcher, and we lived on an island when I was 6 years old. And we had to take a boat to the island, go into town for, grocery shopping. And then one night we went in to see the movies when I was 6 years old. And I sat there flabbergasted with the whole concept that you could have a movie where people start singing. This is the early 1960s. No, it's late 1960s, sorry. And, we didn't have access. We didn't have television. We lived on an island where, my dad was doing some science thing with fish on an island. I didn't know what he was doing. I was 6 years old, and we didn't have television, and our days were spent, get home from the little school there, and I'd go fishing at the boat dock. So we went into town, and we went into a movie theater, and yeah, this may have, I don't even remember having television. So I think this was an overwhelming sense of joyous possibility of, wow, look what's going on the screen, the Mary Poppins characters and the songs, which, it's like one of the, to me, it's like Frozen. It's an incredible work of art. Dick Van Dyke and Julie Andrews and their immense talent, singing and dancing and the choreography, and how even back then the animation and how that interacted and transformed from real life to animated life with the characters and the dancing. I was blown away, and I realized that's where my love of musical theater began, is when I was 6 years old and I saw Mary Poppins. And and there were a few other musicals. Another big one when I was a kid, saw Oliver, the original Oliver movie. And we lived in a small town in the middle of nowhere. We didn't have theater. I didn't go to theater. So when I'd see these movies like Oliver, it was like, blew my mind.
Thank you very much for promoting. Go see Finding Helena.
Yeah, Finding Helena musical.com. You can look for updates, and we're going to get to Broadway eventually. It's going to take a minute, but Finding Helena musical.com. Thank you so much, Ben, and congratulations on all your success.
Thank you. You as well.